4 months ago in this garden bed, I buried whole oyster shells and some other seafood waste after a sensational lunch with my family. Over the top of this, I planted some lettuce seedlings and sowed some potatoes to see if it would turn into a seafood salad. Not really. G'day, I'm Mark from Self Sufficient Me, and in this video, I'm gonna dig up this garden bed and show you what happens when you bury whole oyster shells in the garden, and explain how your Sunday seafood leftover lunch waste is better buried in your garden bed for your plants than it is thrown away at some council refuse dump. Let's get into it.
What do you smell? Huh?
As a family, we eat a lot of seafood, and I don't mean oysters and lobsters. YouTube doesn't pay me enough for that. But we do eat a lot of fish, and I love fishing. So whenever we have seafood waste, it gets buried in our garden. And I've been doing that regularly for the past 18 years here in our raised beds. We never run out of burial space, and it's one of the reasons why I have so much success here in our vegetable garden. In this example, within just a few days of burying our seafood waste, I added some rock minerals and several handfuls of organic fertilizer before sowing some Nicola potatoes around the inside of the bed and planting some cos lettuce all around the outside. 7 weeks later, the lettuce and potato plants were flourishing. We were harvesting some of the lettuce whole, but most of the time we'd cut off tops or harvest the leaves as we needed them. And that's why you can see a few plants are left that have gone to flower. It feeds the bees, and I'm going to collect the seeds to resow for the next crop. Anyway, let's dig down and harvest those potatoes that are still left in there and find out what happened to that seafood waste, particularly those whole oyster shells. I'm really keen to see what's happened there. I'll start by just getting rid of these lettuces. They're not needed anymore, and I'll find some good seeds off the top of them and we'll put them in the shed and keep them for next season. Oyster shells are beneficial in the garden. They are a natural and sustainable resource that can improve soil health and plant growth. As a soil amendment, oyster shells are rich in calcium carbonate, which is essential for plant cell wall development and can help prevent issues like blossom end rot in tomatoes and peppers/chilies. If you have acidic soil, oyster shells, particularly crushed, can help raise the soil pH, making it less acidic. Most plants prefer alkaline or neutral soil pH. This lettuce plant here has totally died off. So you've got these lettuce seeds all here, thousands of them. I'd only need to keep that one. Thousands of them. Some of them will probably come up. Oyster shells can also improve the soil structure by aeration via the shells creating little pockets of oxygen, preventing compaction and helping drainage in heavy soils. In theory, you could use crushed oyster shells as a mulch around your garden to suppress weeds and retain moisture, but you'd have to be eating a heck of a lot of oysters to be able to get that much for mulch, and that's an expensive mulch. I do know of people using oyster shells as a pest deterrent for slugs and snails. Just sprinkle around plants and the sharp edges make it difficult for them to get around. Plenty of worm activity, and adding finely crushed oyster shells to your compost pile can enrich it with calcium, which is beneficial for when the compost is later used in your garden. Okay, let's dig up these potatoes. I'm not sure how good this is going to be. Potato season's well and truly over, so I hope they haven't rotted in the ground. There you go, there's some. Oh, there we go. I'm turning over oyster shells already. Let's stick them to one side and let's get these potatoes out first. Some more oyster shells. Let me just move these over here for now. And we'll just test this side to see if there's any more potatoes. Oh yeah, here we go. Nearly missed that one. So the potato harvest, it's all right. It's not fantastic, but the potatoes were planted fairly late in the season. But that's not really what this experiment was about. I knew this potato yield wasn't going to be that huge. What I am interested in is the seafood waste, and especially these here, these oyster shells. And they look pretty unharmed. They're very strong, but I can feel that they're starting to get, what's the word, a little chalky. You know, I can feel it. Let's see, they're just starting to, they're not as sharp, they're not as slimy and that obviously as they were. There's no smell to them. They're just starting to slowly break down. And these are going to take years to break down in the garden. Let's see what else we've got in there. Let's see if we can find any of the other seafood in here. Here's another oyster. Look at this. You've got a worm that has a home in there. Look at that. And look at this. Check the roots. This is what I mean. The roots are growing in that oyster, like they're surrounding that oyster. That there in itself is proof of how the plants will seek their roots out to find these types of nutrients, and then they will hang all over it and absorb those nutrients. That is very special indeed. Lots of worm activity, but there's no signs of, hang on, that's more oyster shell and more roots hanging out of it. That there looks like, yeah, that's a little bit of shell. That's a little bit of crab shell or lobster shell. Very scarce. It's hardly recognizable. That's another potato. Look at that. Look at those roots. There. That's about the biggest bit of Moreton Bay bug or lobster shell that's left and it's extremely brittle. That too is really good calcium. Yeah, pretty much after 4 months that's all gone. You know what I'm going to do now is these oyster shells that I've dug up, I'm going to throw a couple in here, cover them over, and then I'm just going to bury a few around the bed here. Just share them around. They don't have to be that deep. And next time when I'm growing something in here, the plants will get access to it. So yes, you could break down these shells and crush them up. You could use a hammer. I'd put some eyewear on though, because you don't want a shard of that in the eyeball, and crush them up and sprinkle them in the garden, and you get a better spread of calcium throughout the garden bed. But you don't really have to go through all that trouble of breaking oyster shells up, because the plants only need a small amount of calcium to grow well, and they can get all this through small micro fragments that naturally break down from the whole shells over time. In other words, just let nature do the work. Plus, if you crush all these down into a powder, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, you need to be aware that in a concentrated form, it's more likely you can add too much to your garden bed and make the soil too alkaline, for example. Again, as you saw when I dug this up, this free and effective way of adding nutrients to your garden doesn't just benefit your plants, it helps worms, other bugs and microbes, fungi, mycorrhizal. All these work together in a symbiotic way to help your plants or crops thrive. You want your soil to be alive, and this is what it does. It brings your soil to life. So next time you have a seafood lunch or dinner, consider burying the waste and enriching your garden soil for the benefit of your growing and thriving vegetables. If you do that, your garden will become your oyster. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you give it a big oyster. My thumb fits in there beautifully. Thumbs up. Share the video around and subscribe if you haven't already. Visit my website, selfsufficientme.com. We're going to have merch soon. I'm still working on it. We're getting there. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now. Cheers.